Okay, you're walking around a foreign land and suddenly bump into a toilet the size of a house. Wow, you don't need to go that bad. You rub your eyes, but then comes a new surprise – a giant shoe with real windows. This is not my weird fantasy, but a real tour of the weirdest mansions in the world. Transparent house. If you can never get enough of natural daylight in your house, you can try moving into the so-called House NA in Tokyo, Japan. It has hardly any walls since it's all glass windows. The architects say they were inspired by prehistoric people who lived in trees, and so the entire house reminds of that open and transparent way of living. The Cloud House. Another nature-inspired creation is located in Melbourne, Australia. It's actually an extension of a century-old Edwardian home, carefully added to make the house stand out and bringing history and modernity together. The red kitchen box serves as a transition between the two. The Bubble House. Standing on a rocky cliff overlooking the Mediterranean Sea in the south of France, here comes the house with no right angles. Its architect was trying to recreate a cave dwelling back in the 1970s. Around 20 years later, famous designer Pierre Cardin purchased the house, and it became a place for fashion photography and shows and film festival parties. The Toilet House. My personal favorite. The then mayor of South Korean city of Suwon wanted to have a toilet-shaped house in honor of the opening of the World Toilet Association. So, he took down his old house and instead got a house to satisfy anxiety. This is how they poetically name bathrooms in Korea. There is a beautiful rooftop balcony with flags of different member countries. The house is eco-friendly with rainwater harvesting technology. It is now a toy-themed park that has related art and sells souvenirs. Just, don't be caught swimming in the pool when someone decides to pull that giant shiny handle. Woohoo! Dr. Seuss Tower. This crazy-looking mansion in Alaska has never belonged to Dr. Seuss, but looks like it comes straight out of his books. The creator and owner of the tower, Philip Widener, explains he started with a 2-story log cabin and then he just couldn't stop himself from adding floor after floor. It's hard to say exactly how many of them he ended up with, somewhere between 14 and 17, and the construction is still going on. When he finishes, Mr. Widener plans to put a telescope on top and watch the northern lights. And snack on some green eggs and ham? Arkup. Arkup is described as the next generation floating house, but in fact is more of a floating, luxurious villa. Its creators explain it was inspired by urban growth and rising seas, and gives an eco-friendly, sustainable solution to both. There are 4 bedrooms, huge decks, terraces, floor-to-ceiling windows, and all possible amenities, plus a water purification, waste management, and rainwater harvesting systems. Another cool thing about Arkup is that it's elevated above the water and is stable enough even in rough seas. It's currently stationed in Miami, but can be moved anywhere on request. Bat Casa. Batman fans, rejoice! You can now spend a day or two in a mansion in San Miguel de Allende, Mexico, that's dedicated to your favorite character. There are 2 separate suites inside the masterpiece with curved shapes and structure inspired by Spanish architect Gaudi. There is a vertebrae staircase, cave bedrooms, and tree vines hanging off ceilings. The Flintstones House. Either you're already a fan or not yet. The exact replica of Fred and Wilma's rocky home in Malibu, California is definitely worth a visit. Although it looks prehistoric, the house has 1 bedroom and 2 bathrooms that are 100% modern and comfortable. The house is up for sale for $3.5 million. Sadly, Barney and Betty Rubble don't live next door. But as a bonus, you get the best 360-degree views of the Pacific Ocean, Boney Mountains, and Los Angeles. Malitor House. Also known as the Teletubby House, this mansion in Wales, UK is completely underground, and you can only know it's there by the huge front glass window. The roof is covered with glass and blends with the landscape. The whole construction is curved and smooth on the inside. And even though it still looks like it arrived from the future, it was built in 1998. Giant seashell house. Ever wondered what living in a seashell would feel like? You can find the answer in Mexico City. It's an example of what the designers call bioarchitecture. The house was built for a young family with 2 kids who wanted to get closer to nature. There are smooth lines, spiral stairs, and huge colored mosaics that fills the house with fantastic shades of sunlight. The steel house. It took the owner over 30 years to create this 4-legged steel house in Lubbock, Texas, and it's still incomplete. The original plan was to have just 1 floor, but eventually it transformed into a huge construction that looks like a pig to many. Oink! Its creator welded each piece of 150 tons of blackened steel by hand without any outside help. On the inside, the house looks like a tree trunk with stained glass windows. Element House, Star Axis. Looks like the future is already here in New Mexico. This house is basically a living being, since it can grow with extra units and be rearranged the way you like it. Its sculptor has been working for 40 years to almost finish the structure that is supposed to give you the feeling you are living on a star among many others in the universe. Mirror Home. Do you like looking at your own reflection in the mirror? If you said no, then moving to this home in Almere, Netherlands is probably not the best idea. It's so well blended into the environment, you can only notice it by door handles. Inside, there is a legit studio with sliding doors and birch panels, so it's not all cold glass. Another dome house. The concept behind this suburban mansion in Melbourne, Australia, is to show the various stages anyone is going through in life. It starts from a young single living and slides into a family with many members and extended family. There are many single and double bedrooms inside, a huge kitchen area, dining room, and a garden with some fragments of a traditional home in the suburbs, such as a mailbox, a garden shed, and a cellar. Dalat Crazy House. This mansion in Vietnam takes the treehouse idea to a whole new level. Beep beep beep! Cliché alert, cliché alert. Oops, sorry about that. The creators, inspired by Gaudi, called this a fairy tale house, but it quickly got the crazy nickname. There are sculptures of animals, mushrooms, spider webs, and whatnot inside. Everything in this 5-story-high banyan tree, including the organic furniture, was made by local craftsmen. The HAINES Shoe House. When successful shoe magnate Mahlon N. HAINES turned 73 in 1948, he decided it was a perfect moment to build a shoe house. It's made of simple materials, wood, wire, and cement stucco, and decorated with stained glass shoe-themed windows. The house became a 3D billboard that is hard to miss when driving around Pennsylvania. It has had many owners since HAINES' time, and now hosts a museum on his life and serves ice cream from a shoe. The Mobile Aquatic Pod. Also known as the Exbury Egg, this house was supposed to be an art installation, but eventually turned into a legit home on the water. There is one room with a hammock, a basic shower, and some kitchen appliances in this home floating somewhere in England. You can get inside thanks to a removable dock. M-VELOPE Transformer House. Transformer House doesn't have a specific address, as its panels can be rearranged anywhere you like, any way you like. All this beauty is energy sufficient, made of sustainably grown timber, colored with eco-friendly paints, and using renewable energy. This could be a great holiday home, I suppose. Shenzhen, China. At first sight, it doesn't look like a perfect place to build one of the fanciest and tallest buildings in the world, but a company from China decided to take a chance. They had visions of building Golden Finance 117, a unique, mighty skyscraper with plenty of things super rich people could enjoy. At that time, no one knew it would turn into one of the tallest ghost scrapers in the world, meaning it would be a skyscraper with no life, events, or people inside. The one that no one would even talk about anymore. The world has impressive tall skyscrapers. The first one was built in 1885 in Chicago. And the tallest one today is in Dubai. Then there's one in Shanghai, another one in Mecca, and Shenzhen. Golden Finance 117 was supposed to be the fifth tallest skyscraper ever built. The construction was started 13 years ago, and at first, it all looked very promising. In 2015, the building reached its full height, 1,955 feet. But then, something mysterious happened. People deserted the skyscraper shortly after it was almost done, and the whole project has remained unfinished to this day. The company got the idea in 2008. During that period, plenty of cities across China were trying to build something impressive to get their place on the world stage. Golden Finance 117 was supposed to be a commercial and residential tower for very rich people. Italian and French-style interior design, a polo club, extensive gardens. The skyscraper was supposed to have a 3-story diamond-shaped atrium at the top, with a swimming pool, sky bar, and a restaurant. And don't forget about the highest observation deck in the world, a paradise for those who could afford it. Imagine living at the top of such a skyscraper. Golden Finance 117 was expected to be habitable up to its highest point. This mixed-use skyscraper was supposed to rise 128 floors above the ground. There was a plan to turn 117 of them into commercial space and hotel, and 11 more floors were expected to be for operational and mechanical services. The building's ratio of height to width was 9.5 to 1. When you have such a high and thin tower, you have to be careful with such forces as strong winds. But the skyscraper was designed to resist all this. No wonder, with a perimeter frame of mega braces, huge tapering columns, and transfer trusses. On the surface, it all looked well, an excellent design and unique construction. But before the company started pre-sales, authorities needed to inspect and sign off on the final product. This is a process all new developers need to go through if they want to get and keep their spot on the property market. The country wants only established and reliable companies to keep the quality levels high. Back in the day, the company that was building the skyscraper was a new player in the Chinese market, so they had to finance their project all by themselves. They couldn't start recouping their investment until each of their buildings was finished. In other words, it was tricky ever since the beginning. But they were focused on the result. If they managed to finish the entire project with no major issues, the reward would be amazing. So they started in August 2008. China survived the global financial crisis that also happened in 2008, but it still affected the market. That brought lots of pressure on the company, which is why they stopped building the skyscraper in January 2010. Things got better in 2011. That's when the company decided to continue their work, finish the tower, and get ready to sell it because the market was growing once again. But considering all the rules on the property market, the company was in a very vulnerable situation. Things were getting more and more complicated. In 2015, there was a new crisis, this time affecting the stock market. The series of unfortunate events kept happening on and off until everyone stopped talking about the entire project. One more issue was the location. The skyscraper was being built on what used to be industrial land, and in the area, there weren't many wealthy people who could afford to live in such a building. The company probably hoped for people to relocate there once they finished the construction, which never happened. China generally has the biggest number of tall buildings in the whole world. There are 1,400 skyscrapers in the country. The U.S. takes second place with more than 800 high-rise buildings. Then there's Japan with over 250 skyscrapers. 2018 was the year when China built more skyscrapers than any other country in the world. 88 new buildings with a height of 656 feet or more appeared there. But because of multiple unforeseen events, Golden Finance 117 never got its chance to shine. Now it's just a ghost place everyone stopped talking about in 2018. Now, this wasn't the only case when a building remained unfinished for a long period of time. A new airport in Berlin, Germany was meant to open in June 2012. It wasn't the first project like this to miss the deadline, but it was one of the most memorable. The airport was about to open, but right before it did, inspectors found around 120,000 defects all over the place. For example, some automatic doors didn't open. There were fire safety issues. Authorities also noticed sagging roofs. About 106,000 miles of cable were wired in the wrong way, which means they couldn't turn on some lights or turn off others. Experts were trying to solve these problems for 9 years. The airport was built to handle 27 million passengers a year. In 2019, over 45 million travelers passed through the 2 other overburdened airports in Berlin. These airports are now set to close and merge with the new one, which has started expanding. The original budget for the whole project was more than $8.2 billion, but it's likely to increase in the next few years. The idea occurred back in 1990, and it took 6 years just to find the right spot to build the airport. The official construction didn't start for another decade. The original code for this airport also needed to be changed since it was already in use by an airport in India. But if you design an airport in the early 2000s, will it even be compatible with the travel habits and technology in 2020 and beyond? Also, there isn't enough space for all the planes that are supposed to be there. And still, since 2020, the airport has been open and growing bigger. Meanwhile, a tower in Krakow, Poland, got the nickname Skeleton. It stood proud and tall, but its unfinished carcass indeed looked like a skeleton. At 300 feet, it's one of the tallest buildings in Krakow. The project started in 1975, but stopped because of some difficulties in the country that occurred at that time. The tower remained abandoned for a long time and changed owners several times. It was often wrapped in advertising billboards. Luckily, it didn't remain unfinished. In 2016, the latest reconstruction process started. The main goal was to turn the skyscraper into a modern office building. It's completed now. The tower consists of 5 office buildings, together with the main one in the center. Architects found inspiration in styles from the 1920s and 30s. There's a terrace at the top. In the future, a museum of the history of the building might appear in the skyscraper. And here's one more ghost tower, this time in Bangkok, Thailand. From the outside, you'd say it's just another part of Bangkok's skyline. The skyscraper is around 75% completed. But once you take a closer look, you'll see there are plenty of interior structures missing. It was supposed to be a luxury building, but right now it's just another abandoned skyscraper. It's surrounded by a fence and doesn't look safe. The walls are covered with graffiti and there's no electricity. The building stands there as a reminder of what it could have become and draws the attention of urban explorers from all over the world. The construction process stopped when the crisis started, and now only occasional adventurists visit the site to enjoy the magnificent view of the city and the river. Hey, check this out! It's the only place in the world where you'll find a giant pyramid-shaped construction jetting out of the city skyline. But what looks like a futuristic spaceship is actually a luxurious hotel. But don't rush to book a deluxe room though. This hotel hasn't hosted a single guest in its 33-year history. The 105-story RYUGYONG Hotel was planned to be the tallest in the world and North Korea's greatest achievement. It's more than 2.5 times the size of the Great Pyramid in Giza, nearly 4 million square feet of floor space. You could almost fit Vatican City in this one building. Today, the tallest hotel in the world, according to Guinness, is the 75-story Javora in Dubai. The RYUGYONG hasn't taken that title, but it did earn itself a different record. After 33 years of development, it currently stands as the tallest unoccupied building on the planet. Nicknamed the Hotel of Doom, it looms over the capital city of Pyongyang and has a long, mysterious history. RYUGYONG means capital of willows, and it's an ancient name for Pyongyang. Once finished, the hotel could house up to 3,000 guests. 8 of its floors are supposed to rotate and have revolving restaurants with an unbeatable view of the city. And on the very top stands a massive cone twice the size of the Great Sphinx. A magnificent record-breaking hotel in the heart of the capital would not only bring tourists into the city, but also foreign investors. So, what went wrong? Construction began in 1987. Might not seem all that long ago, but this was back before the smartphone was invented. The deadline for the hotel's completion was tight, 1989, just in time for the World Festival of Youth and Students being held in Pyongyang that year. Unfortunately, due to some engineering problems – more details on that in a bit – it didn't meet its important deadline. It was just the beginning in a series of unfortunate events. The next planned opening was set for 1992, and once again problems with construction and a lack of materials cropped up. The hotel badly needed financial investment, because building such huge constructions takes equally massive amounts of cash. Most of the structure had been completed by this point, but construction was stopped in such a hurry that they accidentally left a crane on the top. It stayed there for nearly 2 decades. For 16 years, the empty carcass of this hotel with big dreams was left in the center of the city. In 2008, construction started once again after a phone company from abroad agreed to fund the project. In return, the hotel would also serve as a phone tower. Heck of a deal. The new completion date was set for 2012. Everything was going smoothly. The RYUGYONG Hotel was now covered in radiant glass panels, and the old rusty crane was finally removed from the top. But as the outside was looking more and more polished with each passing day, a few pictures of the interior showed almost no work done inside. Nothing but concrete stairs, balconies, and pillars, it looked more like an ancient tomb than a luxurious hotel. Yet another planned opening date passed, and the hotel's construction was mysteriously halted again. This time, the building's exterior looked sleek with a new addition of phone antennas on the top. Work picked up, and the new opening date would be in 2013. Then it was changed to be a partial opening, and then it got canceled altogether. The Hotel of Doom was abandoned once again. To this day, it has never hosted a single guest. Only a handful of people have been inside just to see a few floors and rooms. The rest is off limits. But then, out of nowhere, the hotel came back to life in 2017. Well, it wasn't opened, but construction started once again. And in 2018, the giant hotel found a new purpose. Thousands of LEDs were installed on its facade, turning it into a giant screen. From time to time, the lights show a 4-minute program about the country and its current situation. It's usually on during major events in the city. Okay, so you've probably lost count of how many times I said construction problems. So here's the lowdown on those. One of the reasons this particular building was so hard to complete was in its structure and material. Most skyscrapers are made of steel instead of concrete. A steel frame is relatively lightweight, yet sturdy enough to hold the weight of the entire building, though concrete is more fireproof. Whether it was a conscious choice or a lack of steel leaving essentially no choice, the RYUGYONG Hotel was made of reinforced concrete. The material choice also dictated the chosen design and shape. A 3-winged pyramid was the only way they could achieve the planned record-breaking height. Each of the 3 wings is 330 feet long, a little less than the length of a football field. Yet they're just 60 feet thick, enough to fit a bowling alley. This design makes the building look colossal, yet it doesn't have much floor space for its size. The shape might have been dictated solely by the material used and its planned height. Or it could have been a conscious choice and an attempt at not a pyramid, but a mountain. After all, mountains play a huge mythological and cultural role in the country. They're part of the national emblem and even mentioned in the anthem. It's actually one in particular, Paektu Mountain in the north. Koreans believe this is where their nation was born, so the place holds a sacred meaning. The 9,000-foot active volcano has a caldera lake, where many locals believe a Loch Ness-like monster dwelled. But I digress. The hotel's concrete structure choice was also the basis of many rumors regarding its safety. After a concrete apartment building collapsed in Pyongyang, a lot of people started thinking the hotel would meet the same fate. After all, concrete already wasn't the best choice for building a skyscraper, and a sudden halt of construction just added fuel. But experts that had been inside the hotel assured the public that the structure looked safe and sound and shouldn't have any problems. Another issue with the concrete construction is the interior utilities. Unlike with steel, when using concrete, every single utility, like ventilation, electricity, and water lines, had to be planned ahead of time. But since the 1980s, technology has made a huge leap forward, making those original plans obsolete. That can inflate the construction budget to enormous sizes. Despite the problems, the hotel became a huge part of the national identity. The Pyongyang Folklore Park is famous in the whole country for its own mini versions of all national symbols. And among ancient palaces or models of famous mountains, you can also find a miniature replica of the RYUGYONG Hotel. Many local performance groups like to host their shows in front of the hotel and use it as a beautiful backdrop. And for now, that's all it is. The hotel stands empty, hosting only light shows on its facade. But it looks like we could be seeing continued development soon. Just recently, a sign was added above the entrance. It simply says the RYUGYONG Hotel in English and Korean, and local tour guides are already talking about the hotel's upcoming opening. Perhaps in the next few years, we'll see over 3 decades worth of development finally turn into a big opening. Imagine those empty concrete insides, decorated with lavish furniture, guests, and a staff buzzing about excitedly. Otherwise, it'll become a new addition to a list of unfinished projects like highways and parks in the country. And the Hotel of Doom will continue to loom over the city like a shadow, a constant reminder of dreams left unfulfilled, where you can never check in and you can only check it out. Imagine that you don't have to spend hours in traffic jams on your way to the office. No need to be squeezed in a crowd of commuters at rush hour. To get to the supermarket, you don't even have to go out. Just press a button in the elevator or walk down the stairs if you're in an athletic mood. Sound like a miracle? In fact, there's a town in Alaska where citizens have everything they need under one roof. It's Whittier, perhaps the strangest town you've ever seen. Whittier is situated on the coast of Prince William Sound in the Gulf of Alaska. It was named after the glacier nearby, and the glacier in turn got its name thanks to 19th century American poet John Greenleaf Whittier. Was he wittier than the other poets? I digress. All of Whittier's 220 citizens live in one building, a tower of condominiums. No mistake. Well, actually, there's one guy, Paul, who thinks he's special and lives in a camper nearby. Citizens don't only live in the same building, but go to work, school, and do their shopping just by pressing different buttons in the elevator. The 14-story building is called Baggage Towers, and it has pretty much everything you need in life: a police station, 2 supermarkets, town offices, a covered playground, laundry, post office, and a clinic. They even have a church down in the basement. Residents of Baggage Towers can stay there for weeks running and not go outside. Whittier is isolated from the rest of the world and lives mostly off natural resources. Fishing is the main activity of the locals, and one of their main income generators. There's no public transportation in the town, and more boats than cars. Still, it's not easy to live here. Although the climate is more moderate here than deeper in Alaska, thanks to the ocean, winters are very snowy and summers are rainy. You're pretty lucky if you happen to be in Whittier on a nice day without any moisture. Apart from that, because of the high surrounding mountains, there's no sun here from November to February. The locals have a joke that they can always go to Anchorage if they miss the sun. Whittier is cut out by huge mountains and a lake, and there's only one way to and from the town. The road is a one-way tunnel through the mountain that changes its direction every 15 minutes and is closed at night. It's not so bad though. The criminal activity here is very low just because it's really difficult to run away from Whittier. The place is just different. For one thing, it's isolated, and the population density is low here. You might think that it's a paradise for introverts where you can get lost forever. But you'll hardly find a more interactive and social town than Whittier. It's the only place in the world where you can literally live above or under the population of a whole town. You better be on friendly terms with your neighbors. They'll probably never change. Citizens can walk around the many corridors of the building in pajamas and feel comfy among their neighbors. In the months when there are no visitors and local shops close their doors, there's a special feeling of coziness. Anyone can knock on the policeman's door at any time. If students are struggling with their homework, they just knock on their teacher's door. No pro, he lives in the same building, and they can do their homework in his kitchen. There's a good reason for having everything you need under one roof. During the winter months, Whittier is covered with a 20-foot layer of snow. If you're still sure you need to go out, the wind, which blows at a speed of 60 miles per hour on average, won't let you get too far. The wind is so strong, it even keeps the bears away, and there are lots of them here. That's also why the playground is inside. You know the quote, "Winter is coming," right? Well, if you've ever seen Game of Thrones, I'm sure you do. George Martin probably borrowed it from Whittier, since there's no kidding around about winter here. The whole population of Whittier prepares for it. All the citizens, including students, work in the covered garden to get ready for the harsh season. Vegetables are grown using special equipment, resulting in faster growth. Summer is too short to grow veggies here, even if you use a greenhouse. You wonder what made these people come to this town in the first place. Well, they didn't choose to live here. They basically found themselves Whittier citizens because of the circumstances. The town was founded in 1943, and the location was chosen not for its magnificent beauty, but for the natural isolations. The town was built as a defense facility for the U.S. military. They wanted to build an army base in a solitary place surrounded by mountains. So Whittier was an ideal place for that. Apart from the fact that the bay doesn't freeze in winter, it's also suitable for big cargo vessels and military ships. At that time, the only way to get there was by sea. That's why the military hacked a 2-mile tunnel through the mountain to connect the town with civilization by land. Several standard houses were built for the staff working in the harbor there, with very simple architecture. Buckner Building was constructed for engineer troops. Not far from it, a 14-story barracks was built for soldiers called the Hodge Building, the tallest in Alaska. Later, it was renamed Begich Towers, after a congressman from Alaska, Nick Begich, who had gone missing after his plane went down. The tower was built based on the design of engineer Anton Anderson. The Army changed its plans after March 27, 1964, when the Great Alaskan Earthquake, also known as the Good Friday Earthquake, occurred. It was the strongest earthquake in U.S. history, and the second strongest in the history of the world, with a magnitude of 9.2. This is equivalent to the explosion of 1,200 atomic bombs. Wow! As a result of the earthquake, which lasted for almost 5 minutes, a huge tsunami wave demolished the coastal Alaskan towns Valdez, Seward, Kodiak, and Whittier. Valdez was rebuilt in a different place on more solid ground. As for Whittier, the harbor, the petroleum base, and the railroad were destroyed. Both Buckner Building and Begich Towers were seriously damaged. After that, the military forces left Whittier, but the people who'd worked in the harbor and other facilities stayed. In 1969, Whittier was passed to the citizens and officially became a town. People who live there now are descendants of soldiers and workers who lived there at the time of its building. Buckner Building was neglected and still isn't used. They decided not to pull it down because of the amount of asbestos in the construction materials. The dust, which would have appeared after the building's destruction, would pose serious health threats, so they just left it like that. Begich Towers was reconstructed to become the hub of life that it is today. Now, some Whittier citizens go to work in Anchorage, which is 65 miles away. A two-way trip through the tunnel isn't cheap, $15, and they must buy an annual pass for $500. Many citizens work in the harbor, where several tourist ocean liners come during summer months. Like most coastal Alaskan towns, Whittier is much more crowded in the summer. The place where Whittier is located is beautiful. It's surrounded by mountains covered with dense forests, waterfalls, and glaciers. Tourists come here to experience the beautiful nature and have a sea adventure. It's a starting point for cruises, where one can see icebergs and whales, sea lions, seals, sea and land otters, seabirds, glacier bears, Sitka black-tailed deer, and mountain goats. There's also deep-sea fishing for those who like that. Me? I just get seasick and throw up a lot. Whittier also has a couple of restaurants especially for tourists, a Chinese buffet, and even a motel booked for months ahead. There are 200 apartments in the baggage towers, and half of them are empty now. Some people own an apartment but live in a different place like Anchorage. It's one thing to visit for a weekend, and quite another to live here all the time. Real estate in Whittier isn't in great demand, and the population is shrinking a little each year. So, if you're thinking about visiting Whittier, you better do it soon, before all the citizens leave Baggage Tower forever.